I just want to speak to you about when you talk about coaching is a funny one because obviously you consider it success coaching, right? Mm-hmm. But people talk about life coaching and then you've got business coaching. But if it is all under a sort of umbrella as such of an industry, you're obviously young, right?
Thank you.
Do you, you look great. Do you, I guess what I'm asking to you is, do you get clients older than you? And is there sometimes a pretense or an apprehension about the fact that you're younger, therefore how can this person really effectively help me?
I love this question. This is such a good question. So I started out when I was 21. Okay. And in case you were all wondering, so how old is she? I'm 25 now. So you know, I'm turning 26 very soon. But I used to struggle with the limiting belief that I am too young. Mm-hmm. So guess what I attracted? People on the phone saying, so how old are you? What did it certifications? I was kind of like, and that's when you asked me about education. Sometimes it's more important to have the experience, the life experience, rather than the education, I think, personally, to be honest. It's good to have both. Mm-hmm. It's good to have both, but sometimes the experience of actually helping a person is so much different than the book knowledge, right? That's why I always say, you know, librarians should be gazillionaires, but they're not because they're not taking the action. Right. So they know everything, but knowledge is not power. Execution is, you know, so actually doing it. So thinking about that, it actually leads me to my own mindset of knowing I am good enough. And then I saw somebody who was 19, was more successful than me and was doing exactly the thing. I'm like, I'm definitely not too young. And that just clicked something for me. It was my own limiting belief that was attracting these types of clients. And when somebody does ask me, which actually hasn't happened ever since in the last 4 years, I actually ask them, look, here are the results. You know, results speak louder than what I'm saying. Yeah, listen 100%. To my clients. Yeah. Look what they're saying. Do you want to get clients? Do you want to have a 6-figure business that you love or not? And if you don't, that's totally fine. But I have found a strategy. I have the recipe to your success. And if you want to know more about it, let's talk.
Okay, so proof is in the pudding, essentially. It's an execution. So you can, and once you stop, but in the early days, you did have that.
I did.
And did you, I guess, have a few people who had to take a bit of a chance on you? In the sense of when you were a bit of an unknown quantity?
I guess because then it was more like one-on-one, I had way more time to really spend with them. Mm-hmm. So they would still getting great results because otherwise, I mean, as you can tell, I have a very high standard for myself. Mm-hmm. So I would, you know, if they didn't get the results right away, I would focus on, okay, well, what should they be doing? But it's also a fine line between, you know, you are the coach and you can only advise what to do. They have to execute it. It's not your responsibility for them to say, do the work, because I can't sit next to them, even though sometimes I really wish I could just sit next to them and just post the things that I'm telling them to do. Mm-hmm. It's their decision, and sometimes they have to go through that process and learn, right? Like you said, the most successful people, they failed more than, you know, I have or anyone else, you know, because they've just tried so many times.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's part of the learning experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're talking about execution. What do you think is the biggest halt in executing? And what I mean by that is, if I could illustrate it through my own experience, is it took a hell of a lot. I always knew, even for example with this, but I really wanted to do it for a long time, but putting pen to paper and actually executing it is almost is the space of years. What do you think really stops people actually executing in the first place? Apart from limiting beliefs, because that's an obvious one. But, yeah. But if you get past that, what's next to really execute?
Complexity.
Yeah.
Complexity is the enemy of execution.
So, in the sense of making it more complex than it needs to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Overthinking it, fear of the unknown. Because you know when you know what you're going to do, like actually taking a piece of paper and a pen and writing down everything that needs to happen from A to Z to outcome. Mm-hmm. And then you can rearrange it, take another piece of paper and just make it really clear. And then you know, when are you going to do what can you do, and what can you outsource? And then it's not that complicated. It's just because it's all in our heads and we don't take time to write it down. It's complex, right?
Yeah,
we can't
and literally
see.
writing it down is sounds like the simplest thing, but it is
don't do it.
Do you think sometimes, I saw there was a criticism about oversimplifying within coaching, and the sense that sometimes you do have to understand the layers to it. Do you think that's a fair comment, or do you generally think if you have a strong belief that most things can be simplified, it does normally blast through?
That's a really good question. I've not actually heard that before, but I can see that some people think that, if it's too simple, it's not going to work.
Well, I think the criticism is, sorry to cut you off
Yeah,
there,
no,
but the
please.
criticism is it doesn't necessarily address the point. So I think a good example was there was this executive coach who essentially was coaching someone, a big VP in a brokerage. And they did the whole simplifying approach, which I think is great for a lot of people. But in the end, that actually works quite negatively for this person. And he ended up embezzling money and all this sort of thing. Now, I know that's probably a rare case, but my point would be is there is complexity to people's psychology. And that almost kind of leads me back to the point about when there is a need to recognize if it's appropriate for a coach or a psychotherapist. So that's what I mean by that.
I honestly think it's about the results. Like, focusing on, will the process get you to the results?
Mm-hmm.
That's also, what I guess, you decide when you work with a coach, it's like people don't sign up for the process too much. They sign up for, will they get me to where I want to go? So as long as the approach works to get you to the results, I guess it depends on the situation.
So 9 times out of 10, you think simplification is always the best way?
Again, if it gets you the results, if there's missing steps, of course not. Then then it's not too simple, but there's something missing.
There's a layer or something missing there that you haven't paid attention to.
Because I know that in my academy, I've had the complex version of the Confidence Academy, but I've spent the last year simplifying it, cutting down the videos to like, here's the content, here are the action steps, execution, to like 20-minute videos rather than hours and hours of content, But I know now that, if I'd cut one of the videos, they might miss, I don't know, something about like specific cost and consequences of niche marketing and messaging. That's an important factor. It's just a 5-minute video. Man, that video is important. So getting more to the point and focusing on the outcome and rearranging. I have this thing called sticky note approach, and you just like put all these things on sticky notes and you kind of see, if you remove one, it's like playing Jenga, you pull one out and then is it going to fall or not?
I almost do that in my bedroom. There's just a ton of them. Like, yes, I've got that one.
Yeah. There you go.